From July 23rd, the Olympic Games will start in Tokyo. No matter where you live, experts on TV will refer to historical Olympic facts. Some may talk about Nero, the Roman emperor, who became Olympic champion while competing alone. Others will recall the unacceptable misogyny of the founder of the modern Olympic Games, Frenchman Pierre de Coubertin. There was also the dubious Stella Walsh, crowned in female categories in 1936 in Berlin, but found to be a man after her, or should I say his death. And since black lives seems to matter a bit more these days, you will certainly hear of the gloves of two angry black men, John Carlos and Tommy Smith, in Mexico 1968, or about the triumph of Ethiopian barefoot runner Abebe Bikila in Rome 1960. Well, I personally can't resist but mentioning the unbearable lightness of Bob Beamon, the flying black man. Okay, I stole that from Milan Kundera. Anyway, then of course, the black comet Jesse Owens, His Majesty Carl Lewis, and the not-so-black legendary Max Spitz in 1972. In those 1972 games, the world first got dazzled by the 7 medals won by Max Spitz, then got shocked by the dramatic hostage-taking of the Israeli delegation by the Palestinian group Black September. However, in the 72 Olympics, there was another huge dazzling event, or should I say a dazzling man with a dazzling name, John Akii Bua. Admit it's a snap as a name that Africa has forgotten since. The good news is that in a few days, in Tokyo, without even knowing, hundreds of athletes will pay a tribute to him. And now, let's see why.
African History Daily by my daddy.
John Akii Bua literally came out of nowhere to make an abrupt entry into the Olympic history, winning Olympic gold in the 400 meters hurdles race in 1972. Out of nowhere? Well, not really. He came from a small village in northern Uganda where he grew up among the 42 children born to his father's 8 wives. It was his brother, triple jumper Daniel Ogwang, who took part in the 1956 Olympic Games in Melbourne, who introduced John to running. But it was on his mother's advice that he left his village for Kampala, the capital city, where he enlisted in the police force. He tried several sports, but ultimately chose athletics as a gateway to sporting glory. There in the national team, he met Malcolm Arnold. There is a young English coach hired by the Ugandan government. As you can imagine, in very difficult conditions, Arnold, nicknamed Muzungu, which means white person in Swahili, first convinced Akii Bua, the most promising guy, to abandon the 110-meter hurdles race and to focus on the 400 meters hurdle. For the following 3 years, Muzungu slowly polished his diamond, who already got faster than the world record in 1971. Of course, no one took him seriously. Jokers said an English journal, who could possibly run so fast on a red dirt track without the right shoes? John, of course. He arrived at the Olympics, wins his series, then his semi-final, and shows up in the final race where all eyes are logically rather looking at David Emery, reigning Olympic champion and world record holder.
To find that he was only just in the lead from America's Ralph Mann and John Akii Bua from Uganda in lane 1.
September 2nd, 1972. John is very stressed out in his first lane, also known as Death Lane. Nevertheless, he got off to a great start. He flies unabated ahead of David Emery to a finish line. 47 seconds 82. New world record, which makes him the first man in history under the 48 seconds. A time which would have granted him a medal in all subsequent Olympic Games until 2016. Him, the outsider, has just placed Uganda on the Olympic map, And as you can imagine, he was so happy with his move that he couldn't stop running. He continued running, jumping hurdle after hurdle and waving to a more than astonished crowd. He did that twice around the track, and without knowing, he just invented what is now called the lap of honor. Yes, it is an African guy who was the first in history to perform a lap of honor in the history of Olympics. And so logically, every time an athlete does a lap of honor, we should actually say they did an Akii Bua. It's not that complicated, right? And yet, none of a Tokyo consultant will say that. It doesn't matter which country you live in. Bets are open. If you hear that in your country, just let me know. Anyway, he, the first Olympic champion from his country, was welcomed home with honors. Without his Muzungu trainer though. The man felt afraid of Idi Amin Dada, and he was right. The mad dictator who came to power in Uganda was going to mess up the country. Akii Bua was then so popular that it aroused the jealousy of his president. Without his trainer, Akii Bua still won in the following international competitions but stagnated seriously. The Montreal Olympics arrived in 1976. Akii Bua couldn't even defend his title because his country, like 22 other African countries, boycotted the games. Idi Amin, who was killing his own black countrymen, was out there denouncing the presence of New Zealand in the games. He wasn't happy, he said, that apartheid regime was killing so many black people in another country. Seriously, human contradiction, man. Akii Bua's life became then a bit chaotic. Fast forward, depression, alcohol, all sort of excessive things we won't name here, then finally fled to Tanzania with his family following the fall of a dictator. He landed in a refugee camp, from where he was rescued by his former sponsor, who brought him to Germany, tried to put him back to the tracks, managed to return him there, but he was not fit anymore for competition. So he finally withdrew and became a coach for runners in his country. John Akii Bua was covered of gold at 23 years old and died 23 years later. At his death, in 1997, Uganda was still waiting for its second Olympic gold medal. My African cliché of the day is that of the lack of seriousness and rigor of African athletes. Their exploits are still seen as due to their favorable genetics. Some say they have harder bones or bigger ankles or any other stupidity you may hear out there. Akii Bua is the perfect response to that cliché. He worked so hard in preparation of the September 1972 Olympic Games. Imagine, from December to April that year, he did a cross-country every day. And then from May to September, several sessions of 1,000-meter hurdles with a 10 kg vest on his back. And that paid off. His exploit not only won him a gold medal, but also changed the life of a 17-year-old kid in the US. That black kid was dreaming to become an engineer, but like many, he was dazzled by Akii Bua's race. That kid, Edwin Moses, has since then become the greatest 400 meters hurdle specialist in history. Edwin Moses missed Akii Bua in the Montreal 1976 Games, but eventually met his role model in person and said, I quote, "I have the utmost respect for him. Without him, I wouldn't have made this career. He will be forever a major figure for me." That is what the Americans said about Akii Bua. But what does Africans say? What does Africans know and think about him? How many will find their Olympic dreams destroyed by the politicians in their country or so-called leaders? How many will win and do a lap of honor? Oh, sorry, I mean how many will do an Akii Bua in Tokyo this summer? How many, like John, will return home despite this tricky situation at home? And how many will run away and vanish? Think about this tragic life of John Akii Bua when you make fun next time of an African athlete who disappeared in another country hoping for a better life. Enjoy the Olympics. Thank you and goodbye.